Hello, everybody. It is 8:39 p.m. Central Time on the 24th of June, 2021. It's Thursday night here in the United States. Hope you're doing well. We are now broadcasting live over on YouTube. There's no chat room. There's no thumbs up. Strictly earthquakes. Skip all the BS. Get right into the seismic. And that's what we're going to do right now. For all the new viewers, let's just quickly turn on a display capture so you can see what I see a little bit better. Let me quickly explain. First of all, the stream should hopefully be running 24/7 as long as I have an internet connection and can get it to you. And it should be showing 48 hours worth of earthquakes that'll be constantly spinning by on the globe. We're using the USGS and the EMSC coming out of Europe to give us a good idea of what struck over the last 48 hours. I've got it set to 2.0 and greater, so we do have a few smaller earthquakes, which I'll show you in a few, but this gives us a good idea of what's happened in the last couple days. We need to know what's happened in the past few days because that determines our next areas to be hit, downstream and away from the current areas that are being hit. There's a spread that takes place. So we have deep earthquakes also, which are raised high off the globe here. They're easy to identify, the deeper earthquakes, the higher they are off the planet. And the deep earthquakes matter because there's something going on down below the plates directly where the deep earthquakes are happening, but this is over hundreds of miles. Now, this is in a wave tank in a laboratory, but you see what's happening in the fluid, that the wave focuses in on itself, and this leads to what's called a singularity or a spike in the wave. Now, long story short on this is that these waves stand into a standing wave. And let me just show that to you here. Hold on, we'll get this back open. There we go. The standing wave forms over here and spreads out across the other tank. And as we get more energy pumped in, more deep earthquakes, the wave becomes bigger and bigger. Okay, so it's pretty easy to follow that the wave becomes bigger as you pump more energy into the tank. But what's the tank? That's what the big question is. We get over and look at the USGS plate boundary map. Over here, this thick red line that goes all the way around the planet, red lines, and the hammering action that I just showed you in that video, and the standing wave that spreads out from that point, that we get the same sized earthquakes dropped off all the way along the way. Just like in the standing wave tank, we get the same sized waves across the tank, and we hammer more energy into the end of the tank, the wave spreads out, and it gains amplitude, it gains power. And the more you hammer it, the more power that goes into the system. The system is this, the red lines, and it flows like a river. So let me just make sure you guys can see all this. Good, because this is my first broadcast on YouTube in years. So the standing wave forms, and now let's go look at the quakes. Now that you get just the basic gist that there's a standing wave spreading out and it's dropping off the same sized earthquakes across a huge distance, and that the wave tank is the thick red lines going out from here, where the hammering action is taking place in the deep earthquakes. And it goes up to Japan. It also goes across the Pacific. And I'll show you. Do you see our arrows? These were hit 2 days ago, which I think they're still on the feeds. There and there. By 5.2 and a 5.0, 4.9, which downgraded to 4.6. But two of the same size quakes within a magnitude of each other. On both sides of the arrows almost exactly. That's what hit previously. Now the pink earthquake struck yesterday and the white earthquake struck today. And it's all the same size, within a hair of a point of each other, across such a vast distance that I have to show it to you on this map, here. Across from South America, down to the South Pacific, all the way over to where Antarctica meets up with South America, and going up as far north as Central America. You see it here, going up into Peru, I mean. So that's not Central America, that's Northern South America, but it's a spread of the same size quakes, all fives in one direction that way, and then the same thing happened the other direction. Right down to the same point. 5.4 in one direction, 5.4 in the other, all the way over here. So it's trying to balance out, and the spread is not just stopping there. It went up to Japan, 5.2 to 5.3. I'd say that's about the same size quake. And a 5.4 striking over here in Indonesia. Now this 5.4 is a deep earthquake. So wait a second, we have to get back to these. These were what I was talking about with the hammering action spreading out and away, right? And it spread out as far as this way, and it spread out all the way across over to South America. Well, we get another new deep 5.4 here, and imagine no shock and surprise here by me, but we get a new 5 striking up here on the coast of Australia, followed by a 3.6 that struck today. You don't see it on the feed here now, but 3.6 struck right down here, northeast of Adelaide. Kangaroo Island is right down here at the southwest tip of Australia, and Adelaide, of course, right here in the Bay or Harbor. But we're talking right up here on the edge of the mountains, which is really just the edge of the craton of Australia, or many cratons. The craton is just a complex word, a geologist word, to describe the interior portion of a plate or plates, the interior portions that make them up. Comes from the Greek word, I think, kratos. Kratos! I could do a voiceover for Thanos. Okay, we could talk. Okay, anyway, let's carry on. So we get the same size quakes spreading out all the way across over to southwest and up to the northwest and to the east by southeast. All directions spreading out from where our deep earthquakes are hammering in underneath. Now, it doesn't stop there, guys. Energy doesn't stop. It transfers. Watch the arrows on the map again. And we're getting the same sized earthquakes spreading out across vast distances of those arrows in the direction that they point. And come on, it all goes back to here. That this is our wave tank. So when we're looking in the wave tank here, it's organized. It's in a laboratory. It's perfectly square, or well, rectangular. And they're hammering in on this end and on this end, or both ends. They're pumping in energy, pushing these together, and pulling them away. And as you pump it in, more energy fills the tank or the fluid. But we're not talking about a fluid, are we? We're talking about a force that causes earthquakes when it spreads out. It's coming up from the magma down below the plates. It's coming up out of the magma and the stenosphere, which is the underside of the plate, and hammering into the more rigid underside of the lithosphere, under the underside of the plate, it's hammering into. Then it comes up through the plate, the wave that I'm talking about here, and it drops off the quakes along the way. So this is the thing that causes the earthquakes, basically. And we're talking about 5.4. I'm not joking. Again, I'm showing you everything 2.0 and greater in the last 48 hours. 5.4, 5.4, 5.4. Again, if you take these and add them together, it equals 5.4. So it's 5.4s in one direction. And over here, we get the same size, down to the point, guys, 5.4. It's not a coincidence. And then on either side, 5s, by the way. So the standing wave peaks in the middle, and it's a little smaller on either side, just like we're looking in the tank here. The height, I think, of the wave is where the earthquake's happening, but it could happen anywhere along the wave, all the way down to the bottom of the wave. Right? It could happen at the peak of the wave or at the trough or the bottom of the wave. I would think it would be at the peak, where it gets to a point where it can't withstand the wave. Now, what kind of wave is it? Well, let's see. It's a wave that's hundreds, if not thousands of miles long. And each earthquake that pops up is a few hundred to a few thousand miles apart. And the total length of the wave being thousands of miles across, from Chile all the way back over to Indonesia, we're talking about VLF, very low frequency, hammering up from underneath in a concentric wave that comes up first as a deep earthquake or series of deep earthquakes, like what I showed you at the start here. So first there's deep earthquakes, then the spread comes up, out, and away. So first this, then the wave tank starts to happen. Imagine this is just one earthquake, one deep, right? A little wave or a ripple starts to spread out. And then you hammer in more deep earthquakes on both ends of the tank. And now watch down here at this end. Watch what happens to the wave. It reflects back into the other waves, doesn't it? But it doesn't become chaotic. Instead, they become organized into a standing wave. So the energy is reflected back into itself in the tank here in the fluid. Now, somehow, radio wave-wise, or VLF or electrical-wise, it's happening across a vast distance from here, across and out, and here, over, across, and out. And when it gets over to South America, it has two directions to go, two pre-designated paths to take that are just pre-designated because they're weak points in the plate. This wave, when it hits a crack in the plate that's thick and goes all the way through it, goes around the plate instead of through it. Only in places where it gets absorbed into the plate does it go across the plate. It's amazing. It's amazing. Oh man, I'm geeking out already. I'm back on YouTube for a few minutes and I'm doing my thing. So a spread of the 5.4s going out across, going from Fiji all the way over to South America and South Sandwich Islands. And the standing wave is seen by the equal-spaced earthquakes, or somewhat equally spaced, across this uneven wave tank. This is the wave tank. We're not talking about a square wave tank or a rectangular wave tank in a laboratory. We're talking about Mother Nature's wave tank, a series of broken, uneven, jostling edges that butt up against each other. Now think of these red lines. It's crucial. Think of these red lines as cracks in the plate that technically they start at the surface and they go all the way down through the plate to the underside. So it's like having a crack in a countertop that goes from the top of the countertop all the way to the underside of the countertop. However thick piece of stone, whatever. It's a crack that starts at the top and goes all the way to the bottom, theoretically. Now, it's not perfectly straight up and down vertically. It goes at an angle and probably cracks like a stair step all the way down. Nonetheless, it's a crack going from the surface to the bottom of the plate. A plate boundary where two plates meet up. Now, you hammer in on the underside of that. Think of that like a lever. You're taking a lever and putting it on the underside of a flat sheet of stone, however big, and you exert a lot of force on the underside of the stone, and it's already got a crack through it. Where do you think the energy is going to go to first? That's the wave tank. So, we figured out that there's some kind of very low frequency, most likely electrically induced, coming up from the core of the Earth, plasma induced, hammering up on the underside of the plate somehow, and spreading out in a way, dropping off the quakes along the way, and then that gets into the spread that's happened here, going in both directions, out and away. Do you understand now? It's just so basic that there's a hammering action that comes in on the underside, then it spreads out and away. And the bigger the hammering action, the more spread and the bigger it gets. Now, let's talk about over to the west. How about another 5.1 spreading out, plus 4s, right at the pinnacle tip of our arrow, right here at Afghanistan. This is south of Russia. Let me show it to you on the USGS map. Look where it is. It's on the red line again. So the path going out of Indonesia spreads over to the west. It's pretty obvious, but there's a big open area here. Last month, about 4 weeks ago, a 7.4 earthquake struck up here in China, right at the bend or the pinnacle tip of the bend of the Himalayan, which is right about here where this current 4.5 is. Now that's just on the northeast side of the red line, again, which is the plate boundary designated by the USGS here on the USGS map. So there should be a new earthquake that breaks out between the cluster that we currently see here, over to the west, and all the way back down and around over to where the cluster of 5s is. Let's go look on my map here. Going from here, over, around, and down to here, that we find the halfway point between those two. We don't just draw a straight line. We go around the bends of the plate, which the USGS map comes in much easier then. We can go around the bends of the plate, and our halfway point, I would say, if we straighten this out into a straight line, it would be a lot easier, but you can just eyeball it, really, and find the halfway point here in northwest Sumatra, Indonesia. Again, if we're going around the bends of the plate, it's about the same distance from here around over to here as it is about around up and around that way, right? I mean, just eyeballing it on our own eyeball, we can figure out that this is the halfway point between the two sets of quakes that are currently happening. Now let's get back to the wave tank. Set of quakes here, set of quakes here. Guess what's going to pop up in between? A new set of quakes that's bigger than the current set of quakes on either side, because it's reflecting back into itself. It's going along here. It's coming from over here in Fiji and Indonesia, spreading out over to the bend in the plate. Now it reflects back, and at that halfway point is where we get our new break. And so that's where we watch. We watch northwest Sumatra, Indonesia for a new break that's bigger than the 5s on either side, and there's a forecast right here now. Let's show you on the USGS map. Right here. Halfway point between the two. How big? Well, we're dealing with 5s on one side. That's up at the bend of the plate here. All the way down here, we're dealing with 5s. All the way over here, big cluster of 5s. Now, I think of these big clusters like this. Let's back it out a little bit and look at it this way. From the Izu Ridge, which is up here south of Japan, going all the way back down to New Zealand, all the way across to South America, and all the way down to the South Indian Ocean past Australia, that all of this has moved in a day. On a 5.0 basis in the last 24 to 48 hours tops, all this has moved. The pink-colored earthquakes are from yesterday, the white-colored earthquakes are from today. Now, I issued a forecast on my Twitch channel, which you had to be live to catch a couple days ago, where we told everybody where there are 4s, we're going to go a step up to 5s across the board all the way. A couple days ago, let me show them to you. See the earthquakes marked in red? Well, here we go. Those earthquakes that were marked in red are the 4s, all 4s. And when I issued my forecast, that's all we were dealing with, was 4s all the way across here. And I commented about the new deep earthquakes and how that's going to add more energy into the tank, and how everywhere where there's 4s, we're going to go step up to the 5s. And now, not only are we at 5s, we're at 5.4 across the board. So think of the frog in the pot, and we're turning up the heat, and it's not taking that long. It took a day. So we're looking at the possibility of an extremely large earthquake developing out over here in the West Pacific. I already issued the warning a few days ago. We're on pretty much the second to last day, if not the last day, of the 7 to 10 day watch. What's the warning for? A 7.5 plus earthquake to strike over here in the middle of Papua New Guinea in the West Pacific, and we are down to pretty much the last day of it, and all this happens. Now, a new halfway point forms in Indonesia. So my warning going all week for here. I'm not going to cancel the warning, but now that this is the new halfway point and this one's open and silent, both should be hit. It's not that one's going to get hit, both are going to be hit. The standing wave does not discriminate. It fills in the middle point of the previous wave. Watch it this way, guys. I'm going to park my mouse over one of these waves, at the peak of one of these waves. And then you can watch at the bottom of the wave, it doesn't matter, that the wave comes in at the bottom and the top and fills in the previous one's middle point. And then it progresses, and then the new peak comes in. So first the peak, then the valley, then the peak, then the valley, then the peak, then the valley. The peak, then the trough, then the peak, then the trough, then the peak, then the trough. At the peak, I think, is where the earthquakes are happening. I can't prove that. That's just, it makes sense to me that at the peak would be where the stress is. But maybe it's at the lowest point. Maybe at the lowest point where the stress is. Either way, at that equal spacing going across the huge distance. Now that huge standing wave that's in that tank is reflecting back on itself, and it's a big amount of movement going out. It's got to fill in the middle point. So this is the middle point, and this is the middle point. How do I know this is a middle point? Look at it. We got a set of quakes on one side, a set of quakes on the other. Same with right here where the rings overlap. That's another middle point between the sets of quakes that's going to be filled in by something larger than 5.4 on either side. We're about to go another step up. So everywhere where we have 5s, we're about to see 6s. That's why I'm getting on YouTube especially, to warn you now that we're dealing with the potential of large earthquake activity in the West Pacific, plus a flurry of noteworthy sized earthquakes, striking, which again, 6s are noteworthy, 7s are large, 8s are huge, and 9s are megaquakes. That's just a general public rule of thumb. That's not a scientific term. Those are things that we just judge by the size of the event. Now let's go over to the West. So I just got done telling you about let's recap. Oh man, this is a lot for new people. And I'm all fired up. I'm back on YouTube. Can you tell? So deep earthquakes hammer in on the underside of the plate. The spread spreads out in all directions from that. Pretty simple, right? You push up on the underside of something, you expect the energy to spread up through whatever you're pushing up under and to spread up and out through it. Now there's cracks in whatever we're pushing up in, so that crack or cracks enable the force to transfer through the crack and drops off the quakes along the way. It's not that one of these earthquakes is causing the other. It's that all of these earthquakes are being caused by a greater force coming up from down below, and it saturates whole regions, thousands of miles across. I propose it's some kind of electrical-induced VLF coming up from a plasma core of the Earth that's vibrating like a bass drum. And it's fed energy by the sun, charged particles coming in from the ionosphere and magnetosphere. But apparently that's controversial. Let me get a sip of my coffee that I'm drinking right now at 9 o'clock p.m. Oh, Lord help us. Let's carry on, shall we, on our voyage of discovery. Let's go over into Turkey and Iran. So here's Iran on the eastern side, Turkey on the western side, a 4.0, 4.2, striking right there at the border between the two. Let me show you what's there. Well, lo and behold, look what we have. The other plate boundary. Here's Iran, here's Turkey, the earthquake happening on the Iran side of the border, right on the interior side of the red line. Just like all the others. I told you, there's a flow of energy going out like a river, and look which way our arrows point. From these 5s down to these 4s. Now, Europe gets pretty complex. Poland's been hit. Holland's been hit. USGS not covering any of it. Man, talk about scandalous. Rare earthquake striking in Europe. USGS ignoring it when they're reporting 2s and 3s over in Timbuktu somewhere. And yeah, they are. USGS is reporting under 4.0 around the world, and yet they're somehow managing to omit and ignore the earthquakes that struck, let's say, in Poland and France and Holland this week. Well, hey, that's why I'm here, and that's why I was streaming over on Twitch. Now you can see it all live on YouTube 24/7. Watch the earthquakes pop off around Europe, following our arrows. Watch the USGS ignore them. and then wonder how they all missed it. Oh, wait, they're not even covering it. Of course they're going to miss it. The progression of earthquakes going across a plate. But let's go look at the USGS map. Look, the red lines just go through South Europe. Dead end in Italy, don't they? Then carry on over to the west. You see nothing across Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, anywhere through there. Romania, Poland. Look at my map. Why do we have arrows there? Well, maybe a good old copy of Google Earth would be in order. You got to say Google Earth like that just because it involves Google. But let's go in and take a look. Oh, come on, I love Google. I use it all the time. I use it every day. Google Earth. Now look, pick your favorite country in Europe as a point of reference, but I'm turning them all off. You need to look at the backwards S-shaped bend of the plate in Europe, covered in trees. These are mountains. Now I'm going to turn these back on, my place marks, because it really matters. There's something there at each bend of the plate. Let me show you. USGS and the Smithsonian have taken the time to actually mark the volcanic fields, and we'll wait for them to populate here. Again, we're waiting for that to load. They're marked with triangles here. So at one bend in the plate here, volcanic field. Another bend of the plate, volcanic field. We go up and around, you see up here at Slovakia and so forth, the Bruntol volcanic field. Then we go around the bend of the plate up to the Sheb Basin. We go around the bend of the plate to the East Eiffel over in France. And then we go, or in Germany, and then down to France at the Champ de Puys. And that's down in south central France. Then we carry on. You see it going across Europe. And these are somewhat equally spaced, I would say, as well. Wouldn't you? And not only that, well, I'm not asking, I'm telling you, they are equally spaced, and the edges of the European craton are what we're talking about here, which the USGS has not marked and has no place marks on their page at all. But yet we see earthquakes go around this edge regularly. We also see, if a push is great enough coming in out of South Europe and the Mediterranean, that it goes following the red line that the USGS map has now, following this red line, and it dead ends into Italy. And we see a earthquake outbreak take place across Italy, across North Italy, where it dead ends into the Alps. So we see energy come across the W-shaped bend of the Mediterranean, and it sometimes, only sometimes, goes up into Italy. Most of the time, it spreads three ways, like a river flowing out across a rock. And that this is the obstacle, and instead of going through it, it goes around it, the energy that I'm talking about here, this flowing wave. And it drops off the quakes along the way around the outside edge of the craton. It doesn't just happen that way in Europe. It happens that way on every single plate. Let's get into other plates. So, progression of quakes, equally spaced, like a standing wave, going up across all of the plate boundary across Japan, for instance. Now, you remember what I told you about where the rings overlap. Those are the halfway points, or what we call a fulcrum point, a middle point. So think of the halfway, think of this as an earthquake, and this is an earthquake. And this is the halfway point between them, right? And we find that halfway point between the two quakes, and that's where the new wave's going to spread to. Let me hit play. And that's where the next size quake, a little bit bigger, strikes. So we look at the quakes, and we look right down here. The coast of Japan, south of the coast of Japan on the Izu Ridge. And we go up here to the north, and where they overlap on the north side of Hokkaido going into the Kuril Islands. Something bigger than 5.2 plus 4.6. So if we take the 5.2 plus 4.6, guess what it equals? 5.246. Pretty easy, right? That's how you add magnitudes, by the way. So 5.246, we would get something larger than that, striking in between the two. Something very close to that. I try to get it within a magnitude. Hopefully I'll someday get it refined down to a half magnitude. But somewhere greater than the 5.2 should strike, or somewhere very close to it. Strike right in the middle point. Let me go to the USGS map now. Look, we got to go back to the USGS map to do this. See the red line again. And I just told you, let me show you again, halfway point overlaps right down here on the Izu Ridge. What does the USGS have there? They got the red line. The plate boundary. The halfway point between the two right here. That's the first spot. The other spot is up here, north of Hokkaido, right in the south point of the Kuril Islands. Both are going to get hit by something larger than what's on both sides. Take this 4.6 plus this 4.4, we get 4.644. We can round it up, it equals 4.7. So we get something greater than 4.7 striking here on the north side within the next few days. Same goes for down here on the south side of Japan, but we have huge clusters we're talking about now. Now we're talking about a huge cluster going all the way across Indonesia and South Philippines. And up here, next to Taiwan, is the other cluster. There's a big open area right here. Guess who's right in the middle? Two volcanoes, Suwanisejima and Sakurajima. Let's go check the Volcanic Ash Advisory Center and just go quickly see if there's any new volcanoes on the list. Mount Etna in Italy. Several times. Strombolian eruption, which is blasts and lava flows, but there's been ash activity. It doesn't normally get on the ash advisory. This is for pilots when there's big blasts. Dukono, Sabancaya. These are regular eruptors on the list. Same with Fuego in Guatemala. Suwanisejima, I just mentioned, that's in South Japan. Fuego, Etna several times again on the list. I'm looking for big eruptions or new additions to the list that aren't normally on here. And I'm not seeing any new additions to the list. The last one to add on was Nevado del Ruiz down in Colombia in South America. Let me show you where these all are. Suwanisejima is right here in the middle, smack in the between where the earthquakes are. Actually, here, it's right in the islands just south of Kyushu. So that's the middle point, wouldn't you say? It's erupting. Up to the north, we have no eruptions across all of the North Pacific. That's going to change. I don't issue forecasts for eruptions, but when I see it go quiet, that's when I know that something's about ready to go through the roof when we have this many 5s and greater and deep quakes striking. Back down to the south, we have Dukono right here. This is in North Indonesia, a regular eruptor on the list. Who's missing? Everybody else. Mount Sinabung up in northwest Sumatra, not erupting. Mount Kerinci, not erupting. Mount Krakatau, not erupting. Where are they? Mount Semeru, 40,000-foot high blast just a couple weeks ago. Nothing. Quiet. I don't like quiet when the rest of this is going on. Again, there's a huge standing wave forming on the edge of Indonesia, and it's gone quiet across all of Sumatra and Java. This is Sumatra. This is Java. And we have a warning going for a 7.5 that's about ready to expire, and it hasn't hit yet. And in the middle of it all, again, we're looking for a 7.5 right in the middle of this whole hot mess that we're looking at currently taking place now. The only thing missing is the big break in between it all. Now let's talk about Central America and South America, speaking of big breaks. So a few days ago, this happened. This deep 5.4 struck right in South Mexico at the border of Guatemala. We have Fuego volcano erupting right here. But I'm going to have to go back to the USGS map again. Let's do that. Here we are. Now look at this. We have a deep 5.4 that happened over here. Red line. But look where the red line goes. It goes across Guatemala and goes over into the Caribbean. And right here where the two meet up, that's where Fuego volcano is erupting. So first, we get the hammering action coming in on the underside of the plate here. Over in Mexico, one more time, we get this, something like this, spreading from hundreds of miles down below, coming up, hammering into the underside of the plate. In Mexico, right here. That was a few days ago. When that happened, I got on Twitch, issued a live warning, and told everybody to watch over here, first for Puerto Rico, then over at the stair step at the Cayman Islands. First warned area, primary warned area, Puerto Rico, and that we'd be going back up to near 5.0. And I warned for 5. Well, what happened? Let's go take a look. 4.2 and a 4.3. We add them together, it equals 4.42. In other words, a mid-range 4 hit. I'm within the magnitude on my warning. It's a big step up from where they were, and it's hit right in the spot. We warned southwest Puerto Rico, along the coast where the previous light swarm of zeros and ones were happening. 4.3 and a 4.2. Now let me show it to you. Where did it hit really? Look, guys, on the inside edge of the red line again. So first, 5 underneath here, spread all the way over to the east, drops off a mid-range 4 over here. Now, I would think between the two, something larger is going to strike. And that's our third warned area. The Cayman Islands on the stair-step fracture zone that previously got 7.0 activity a few years ago. Unexpectedly, it was one I didn't issue a forecast for. But then again, I was being attacked and shut down, and I wasn't even online. So I guess there's a good reason I wasn't around, but... So here we are. We're in the Central America region. Puerto Rico, check it off the list if you were keeping track of areas that we warned. The only area to get hit now that hasn't yet been hit are the Cayman Islands, sandwiched between the two areas that have already been struck. Volcano-wise, let's go down to the south because we have to talk about Nevado del Ruiz volcano here in Colombia. filling in that middle point between our sets of quakes in South America and up here to the north in Central America. And look what extends out from Nevado del Ruiz volcano over to the east, Giant Arrow. So we're going to watch the halfway point between the tail end, the X, and where the eruptions and earthquakes came rolling in a few days ago. Let me show you the earthquakes from a few days ago. There we are. So Panama, Colombia, volcano erupting right here. And we would expect the energy to flow around and go out to the X at the Ascension Island region. How big? I don't even know if it matters to anybody, but it should be in the 5 range because that's what we're dealing with going into the system. Look, the wave doesn't lose that much energy. I think I proved that already, that if we're spreading out in 4,000 miles in one direction and 4,000 in the other, and we're dropping off the same size quakes all the way along the way, that's not that much loss of energy. And then it goes around the plates. That's just the most amazing thing. Remember what I told you about Europe? The arrows, the flow flows like a river almost. And instead of going through something, it'll try to go around it, path of least resistance style, following the cracks in the plates, following the volcanic fields, even following drill points in oil fields. So the same thing applies over here in South America. The flow is coming across, let me give you a good analogy. A train is coming across a bridge. Okay? It's powered by energy from deep down within the train. Now, as the train is coming across the bridge, it vibrates the trestle. Now, that's the earthquakes that we see here as the energy is coming across over the past several days. The color coding tells us how old the earthquakes are. The red earthquakes are from several days ago. The pink and white earthquakes are from the past day and two, okay? So these happened a few days ago. Energy was coming across. I got on Twitch, talked about the energy coming across. Let me show you where these two quakes are on the USGS map. Well, I think you can guess where they are. They're here and here. Now, why would they strike there and there? Well, energy's coming across from over here. And it's spreading out, and when it gets to this point, it's like a wall. Think of a train coming back across the bridge again. Across a trestle, it's vibrating. But instead of hitting a wall, it's got a mountain that it's going to be crashing into. And it does. And it crashes into the mountain. And it tries to go around it. Well, first it tries to go through it, but it can't. Right? Mass, inertia, motion tends to stay. An object in motion tends to stay in motion, right? Well, in this case, the object in motion will go around the greater object. That's if you have an object in motion that's of less mass and or energy, and you have an object that's greater in energy, the object that's lesser in energy tends to get deflected around the object of greater energy. And that's what we're dealing with here on a grand scale, spreading out across the plates. I can't believe that all the professionals missed this, but they did because they were too busy denying it. They said that this couldn't happen. But it goes around the plates. This energy flows around the plates. Drops off the same sized earthquakes along the way because we're dealing with some kind of VLF or very low frequency electrical induced current of some kind. It's trying to find a path of least resistance out to termination source. Guess what the termination source is? The Mid-Atlantic Ridge. But it's really just the equal and opposite side of the planet. Oh man, that's going to get me in trouble with flat earthers. Let's just say it's the equal and opposite side of the whatever. And here we are, where the energy flows to the X's. If it's a big enough push, like here, it goes back into the planet and comes back out on the opposite side on the antipode with new deep earthquakes, starting the cycle over again. So our antipode is just a complex word to describe the opposite side of something. Don't you love scientists? They always create these terms to, well, I mean, it's the word itself, antipode, right, can be traced back to whatever, but it's the opposite side. It goes in one side and comes out the other, just like a tide or a feedback loop in a sound system. Now, United States, USA! Many people ask me, why do I get to the USA last? I'm not trying to get your view in the US, guys. Lord knows you'll even hang on long enough or have the attention span to watch something an hour long having to do with international before you, but we are the last to receive the energy here in the US. Look where we are on the USGS map here. Pushing up comes from mainly over here in the West Pacific, over to Central Middle East, and the south portion of Central America. Deep earthquakes go across here, usually. Sometimes up to Japan, but mainly across here. And we are on the opposite side. Now, the hammering action and the standing wave is following the red lines of the plate boundary and path of least resistance directly across, following the fracture zones, which I did not explain. The fracture zones down here aid in the energy going across to the south. You can see them. They're east and west facing, but they're also like walls north facing, wouldn't you say? If you're trying to go this way, these are like fences you'd have to jump over or hurdles. These flow over to the east and capture that energy. And I think that's why they're there to begin with. There's only one spot where they come through at American Samoa, and that's where Tamu Massif is, right there. Hawaii's on the other side. Oh, wait, Tamu Massif here, Hawaii on the other side here. We come down and we have another undersea mount here and another set of islands here, just like Tamu Massif and Hawaii. I don't know what these two are, but you see them. It's equal spacing on both sides of this undersea mount ridge, of which Hawaii branches off and goes out to the Hawaiian Island chain. The Hawaiian Island chain connects back up and goes up to Kamchatka. But you can follow this down and around, you see? It makes a crescent shape. This undersea mount chain. And it goes up into Peru, doesn't it? Where the earthquake is. Oh, I'll be darned, where the 5.4 is. And we go back up and we follow it to Hawaii, and then we follow it back up to Kamchatka. Now look, everywhere east of this undersea mount chain, this crescent-shaped undersea mount chain that goes down to Peru, and again, earthquake at one end, and we go back up to the other end, and that's our open area that's yet to be hit. We're going to see a new earthquake strike in the middle point there. Anyway, the undersea mount chain there, everywhere east of it, look, a virtually equally spaced fracture zone spreading out to the east from there. There's only one spot where it comes across right here across American Samoa, and look, it goes back to where the hammering's coming in. So hammer comes in here, spreads out to this C-shaped fracture zone, and then it goes to the east, following path of least resistance, mainly across to South America. And thus, we get big earthquakes over here on one side, big earthquakes over here on the other, in a short period of time. What does that have to do with the USA? The USA receives the energy last, and when it comes in, it comes up, around, and down into the Juan de Fuca fracture zone, the supposed remnants of an ancient plate. Now, I don't know. I don't know. I would say that this is just a broken off point of the Pacific plate, and we know the jagged edges of the Pacific. This belongs to the Pacific plate, the jagged edges that go into the Juan de Fuca fracture zone here. But nonetheless, whether it's a broken point on the Pacific plate that's its own little separate section, or whether it's a separate place, the remnants of, this is a barrier or a buffer that absorbs some of that energy, and it starts to vibrate, this thing, as it goes down and gets pushed underneath North America in this quote-unquote subduction zone. Now, the energy comes in from the north. See how smooth the plate boundary is? It's like a flowing river. Once it gets here, it's like a rapids or a jagged edge, or actually, it's more like a dam that captures the energy, and then coming out of the dam, we have it focused down into a very fine point. The south arm of the Juan de Fuca goes right down into the San Andreas. But wait. This gets into the cratons again. This gets into what I was telling you about Europe and South America and the energy going around the plate, as opposed to directly through it. That it goes along the edges, and then gets absorbed by the plate and transferred across it, path of least resistance. And remember this craton diagram, because look at the earthquakes in the last 2 to 3 days. Now, it might look like a jumbled mess, because it is, but I'll turn off the magnitudes at least so you can see the rings. Just remember the rings equal the size of the quakes. We're dealing with 0s, 1s, 2s, 3s, and a 4 down in Mexico down here. That's the size of a 4. Here's the 3s, here's the 2s, here's the 1s, here's the 0s. But it's a match. Here, let me turn down the rings now so you can really see it. So this is not even a week. Here's a full 7 days. I'll talk about the earthquake down, or the experimental explosion, down off the coast of Florida 2 days ago. Something else happened in Florida last night, but up here in the northwest, you can see it, edge of the craton, and coming out of Montana, going down into Yellowstone, it's so obvious. It's a diagonal line, and it actually makes its own arrow. In the last 7 days, that it makes its own arrow. This is how I put arrows on here, guys. I saw the earthquakes making their own arrow pattern going over to the east. And I was like, whoa, that looks like an arrow. And then the next day, an earthquake strikes over to the east that's bigger. And I'm like, whoa, this is me back in 2011. What? That looks like an arrow. I better watch down to the east-southeast where it's pointing. And then the next day, or a couple days later, east-southeast on the edge of the craton, down in like Oklahoma or the New Madrid seismic zone, mainly Oklahoma, sometimes Arkansas, sometimes Texas in rare cases. But northwest to southeast, boom. And these earthquakes going across the edge of the craton, and it's a perfect match, especially up the east coast. Going all the way up to Quebec, eh? get your Molsons up in Quebec because look, you got hit. And it's on the edge of the craton. Come on. Now, speaking of the edge of the craton, we have to talk about this earthquake down here, which is not an earthquake, listed as an experimental explosion by the U.S. Navy. Down here off the coast of Florida, north by northeast of Miami, on the coastal plain. Ship testing, they said. What's really weird about that is that the day before, you don't see it on the feed here now, this is almost 7 days old, or well, 5 days old, that there was a 3.8 up here at the 1953 oil fields of Indiana. That was a 3.8 to 3.9 the day before, the morning before. So the morning before, 3.8 strikes in Indiana at an old oil field. Then the next day, a 3.9 strikes down here off the coast. They call it experimental blast. Then last night, all of a sudden, Miami. I just have to mention it. So now let's go look at the last 24 hours worth of earthquakes. The reason we do this, we need to get a good idea of what's moving on the West Coast now, so we can determine what's about ready to happen in the next few days. We're going to issue a little forecast for the West Coast. In addition to the West Pacific, where we're looking for big earthquake activity, seeing a dramatic drop-off in activity over the past few days on the West Coast concerned me, with no earthquakes reported at all in the Northwest those days. Multiple days where no earthquakes at all were reported and no tremors were reported. It's like they shut down the system in the Northwest. Well, right now we're looking at everything 0.0 and greater. Let me make sure I've got the correct feed turned on. 1 day, USGS 0.0, apply. And in the last day, the USGS tells us not a single earthquake, not even a microquake, has struck across Washington or Oregon. That the entire Northwest Pacific has gone quiet. PNW, quiet. Across Vancouver, all across here. Not a quake in sight. That's odd. It's the most seismically prone area on the planet, if not the United States. So I would have to go over and take a look and see if the tremors are showing anything. I mean, if the earthquake stopped, surely the plate hasn't stopped moving. If it did, I'd think it was the end of the world or something. 64 little tremors, but look where they are. Hold on. 64 tremors, but look out here in the ocean. Do you see it? It looks like a giant arrow pointing into where the tremors are. Let's turn on their undersea imagery here. There it is, the southern arm of the Juan de Fuca fracture zone. Now, where have I seen that before? Let's go back over to the USGS map. Here, the giant arrow, which really is just a sawtooth edge of the Pacific. And the tension is coming from the Pacific, and it's pushing into the Juan de Fuca. The energy is traveling up and into our plate. This is down below. This is up above. These tremors in between, or down below. So I would think they'd be in between, but this is up above. You got to understand, this on land is up above this in the ocean. And we go back over here and the one, think of it like this. This is down below this. And so energy comes in from here and it goes up into the plate. And we get vibrations up in the plate. And that's what these are, these little red dots. So it's moving in Oregon right now. 63 in a day, no earthquakes reported. Right here. Now next to it, that line of earthquakes going down into Yellowstone. Yesterday was swarming. Today we have 4. Total 4 earthquakes today. There's usually hundreds of tremors per day in Yellowstone. I'm not talking about the tremors. The tremors are the vibrations. These were actual breaks in the plate. And look at our arrow. Look at Montana. Look at our arrow. Look where Yellowstone is in northwest Montana, where the 3 earthquakes are. Now look at Idaho next to it. Now I'm going to bring back up the craton diagram. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Yellowstone. Look at the craton. Look where the supervolcano is formed. It's formed right at the edge of the purple versus the orangish brown, hasn't it? That's where Yellowstone is. That's where the earthquakes go to. And then it flows down across the edge of the craton and goes down into Texas. Now look at the craton diagram again. Look at Texas. Look where the earthquakes go to. They go down around and make a trajectory or a bend. Look, it's following it almost perfectly. This arrow has been on the map for years. These are all drill points down in Texas, and I'm just going to go into the middle and pull the biggest of the bunch. We're going to put the coordinates in down in Lindsay, Texas. Lindsay, Texas. Yes, come on up here to Missouri, guys. If you say Missouri in the wrong spot, Missouri, they'll correct you. Hey, that's Missouri. look where we are. I seem to think I've looked at this spot before. And as we're zooming in, you'll see there's a bunch of little squares on the ground that are not from farming. You zoom in and you're going to see tanks and pumps and jacks and pipelines. A lot of them too. Oil and gas. This is the oil and gas pumping operations along the edge of the Craton down in Texas. Now over to the east, look at the size of the pumping operations we're dealing with on the edge of the Craton. Every one of these is a drill point. Just randomly zoom in on the oil wells. But I would call this extreme overdrive, wouldn't you? This many drill points just in one little county area? They've done whole counties like this. Look. These aren't houses. Whole counties this way. Millions and millions of drill points, and I'm not exaggerating. So they've drilled out the edge of the Craton, and the earthquakes are following that path. Think of perforations in a piece of stone. Just even maybe scoring the top of a thick slab of stone, scoring maybe just a quarter of an inch on the top thick slab of 100 feet thick, and you apply the right amount of pressure at the right point, and it's going to flow across that broken edge and break it. And that's what we're dealing with here on the edge of the Craton. The breaking due to drilling. Same with in Oklahoma. I'm not even going to bother looking up the Oklahoma earthquakes. You guys are welcome to do that. 500,000 drill points across Oklahoma right there. Over to the west we go. They made my job easy today by not reporting any quakes. However, I'm going to have to say it. When it goes quiet, my radar goes off. Another sip of my coffee. Especially when the rest of the plate's going into overdrive. And I mean the rest of the plate around the planet, the Pacific going over to Europe and the Pacific going down to South America. I've already showed it to you 20 times in this update. So let's get into here. Hey, new earthquake struck over here in Utah. When? Hold on. 152 UTC. Within the last 45 minutes, a new 3 has struck here in Utah. Oh no. Let's go pull the coordinates and go look it up. We need to get them from the USGS. This is a fresh quake. This is on, look where it is. It's on our arrow. I mean, it is right there. Energy transferring out of California, which was 3s as well. So we were dealing with 3s in California, now we're dealing with 3s spreading over across the arrow. But I need the coordinates from the USGS. Aurora, Utah. Aurora, Utah. 8.3 kilometers deep. Very specific. Let's go look. Go see what's there. I say, old boy. I think I've looked up this location before. Oh, wait. Hold on. Now, just wait a second. We are right next to Black Rock Desert Volcanic Field, but I'm concerned about all these red little dots that are on the map here. These little red dots are detections from the weather satellite. The GOES weather satellite, the new one they launched. So nobody can say that this is, Dutch since seen hotspots. These are hotspots detected by the computer, and they filter them out because they don't know what to make of it. They appear, these sudden bursts of electrical heat energy that the satellite picks up. It's not a fire, but it identifies it as a fire and then quickly removes it. People tried to say that it was farmers burning their fields at first, till they showed up out in the ocean and above volcanoes and other locations. Then they kind of backed off on trying to deny that there were hotspots happening. But articles were written saying that only I could see them. This was before GOES was updated and they launched the new GOES satellite, made it operational. So now here we are, and the new satellite's showing them, and now everybody can see them, and we can click on them and everything and get the info, and the computer filters them out. But there are electrical discharges coming up out of the plate next to areas that are in tension from seismic. Yes, rock under tension produces major electricity and conducts it like a semiconductor, according to studies I posted over on my YouTube community page. So seeing these little red dots around here is pretty suspect, on top of the earthquake being right next to Black Rock Desert Volcanic Field. And that's a lava flow. In case you don't know about it, take a look at it. Really impressive looking. Black basalt going out in all directions. Igneous rock, actually, not even basalt. And then there we go, old remnants weathered down from a long time ago. They would say million years, but I don't know about all that. The new earthquake striking there, though. Same size as the quakes down in Texas, same size as the quakes over in California. The bigger earthquake, of course, coming between the two. That would be southern Colorado, where the rings overlap right there. Hey, let me show you what's in southern Colorado right there where the rings overlap, right here. Going down into New Mexico, all the way across here. You know what's right across there? Where we have to watch now as the new halfway point for a new break to take place. Well, first of all, let me turn my borders and labels back on so I can even find the dang place. Here we are. Oh, wow! Hey, look at all the red dots down there. All the detections of hotspots across southern Colorado going across down through New Mexico. But I just need to show you. Tens of thousands of drill points again. So it shouldn't be a shock. Look, you got 100,000 drill points in southern Colorado down here going down into New Mexico. They cut across right down here, where, again, we're dealing with literally hundreds of thousands of drill points. Let me show you, in case you don't believe me. Every one of these little squares on the ground is a different drill point. Kind of looks like campsites or something, doesn't it? But when you zoom in and you find an oil well or multiple oil wells at every single one, and then you go out and you see this is the Four Corners area of Colorado. Here's Colorado on the north side. Here's New Mexico on the south side. We've got hot spots out in the middle of the drill points. The drill points are numbering in the hundreds of thousands all the way across this area again. Every single one of these little square pads. Yes, they drilled so much here that here's Durango, Colorado. All the drill points going over to Pagosa Springs and down south number in the tens of not hundreds of thousands just right in here. And that's where the hotspots are showing up. And that's our new halfway point. So we have hotspots currently at a spot where it's under stress. The standing wave is spreading out, and something bigger than the threes is going to strike on both sides. Northwest, I would also look out here, right along the coast. So let's warn. I don't normally warn up here at all. I really don't, especially on land. I could name maybe in the past 10 years on land where I've issued a warning for Seattle south to Portland, maybe twice in 10 years. Normally it's out in the ocean. But look where the arrow is. And it's gone quiet. 60 tremors on the south side. Big push coming in from the north side. Hasn't broken yet. We should see it break. And it should break between our previous sets of earthquakes. There was an earthquake last week, right at the end of the week, 7 days ago. Up here at Seattle, 3.8. Which puts the new halfway point right in here. Between our threes to the south and our threes to the north. How big could it go? We're dealing with fives around the plate right now, around the Pacific plate. And they're all happening on the interior spot where the plates meet up. Let me take you back over and show you here. So the rest of the planet now, you see where the rest of the fives are striking. Most of them are happening right along the red line. A few of them are happening on the inside edge of where a plate meets up with the Pacific. Now, I would arguably say that this point even here, technically, meets up with the Pacific when the energy is flowing out to the west. Now, over to the east, same thing happened, but it spread down to the south, at the red line to the south, here, and all across the southern continent, or South America continent. What does it all mean? It means that 5.0 range level activity is coming back in here in the northwest in the next few days. So get ready for it. It's enough to knock things off shelves. I hope I'm wrong completely. We were right last week. A week ago, 2 weeks ago, I issued warnings for 6.0 level activity to strike out here off the coast of northwest California. Then, two 5.9s struck here off the coast of Oregon, 13 miles long. When that happened, two 5.9s, 13 miles long, 30 minutes apart, I issued a warning for Southern California at Salton Sea, California at the Bay Area, and California at the California-Nevada border at Ubehebe Craters. I warned all three locations for 5.0 plus activity to come rolling in a week. This was last week. Last week, a 5 hit down at Salton Sea. Months since anything like that had happened. Maybe even longer, but certainly months since a 5 down in Southern California. And it was 5.2. Then the Bay Area got hit by a 4 point something, or a bunch of, I think it was. It was a 4, they downgraded it to 3.8. So I warned for a 5, a 4 hits. That's on the edge of what I would consider an earthquake forecast miss, but it's within the magnitude. So still, 4 comes rolling in instead of a 5 in Bay Area. 5.2 hits exactly down at the Salton Sea area. Then on day 7 of the watch, finally an outbreak took place at the California-Nevada border. That was last week. So this week, it looks like something's building up on the north side
And it should strike right in the middle of the whole hot mess that's quiet. A hot mess that's quiet. If there's no such thing. Okay, it's going to be a hot mess. It's quiet right now, and I'm looking right in the middle of it because of the standing wave. You watch between the current sets of quakes. Again, one more time, go into the tank. You watch between your current set of waves. So it's about to strike up to the north, I think, since it struck down to the south last. The spread over to the east, let's just go ahead and talk about the East Coast. So that building collapse down in Miami, look, the day or two after, whatever, within a couple days of an experimental blast 3.9 off the East Coast in Florida, and that a day after the plate shifted up in Indiana, the 1953 oil field, and that, of course, after 13 miles broke on the West Coast, so it was like a progression. 13 miles breaks on the West Coast, 2 5.9 quakes. Southern California gets hit by a 5. Then a spread of 3s goes across the plate up to Indiana. Then a 3.9 experimental blast happens out there in the ocean. Then a building collapse happens down in Miami, super rare. And it's right on the edge of the Craton. Their blast, one more time, out here in the ocean. Let me go ahead and turn our 7-day feedback on. See if it's still on there. Just so you can see. Again, it's north of Miami. Miami's down here to the south. But I would say that blast on the edge of the plate, there it is. Bermuda Triangle. Miami's down here. So it's just east by northeast. That's not far, guys. That's not far. Seismically speaking, that's just a hop, skip, and a jump. But this one being an experimental blast, after the rest goes across the plate, that's pretty weird. Maybe it was. Maybe it was an experimental blast to expend energy off the plate. Maybe it wasn't for ships. Who knows? Again, it's speculation. All I'm getting into is that there's a spread of earthquakes happening. It's getting ready to take place in the northwest. Should be in the 5 range. And then after that, I'll issue new warnings. And what we can expect, here, let me just quickly tell you. 5 strikes up here in the northwest. Look at all the arrows. Which way do you think it's going to go? Well, it's going to follow all the arrows. Think of the 5 that's going to be deposited up in Washington and Oregon, and right off the Juan de Fuca. Think of that 5 like a giant storm dropping a lot of rain. And that these are 3 forks in a river that come together over in Colorado and on the edge of the North American Craton. And so you deposit a bunch of water on a river, and those are the 3 rivers, and they all flow together into one. You know which way to watch. It's pretty basic. And there's a flow. How do I know? Look, this is last week's worth of quakes. 4s and 3s on the West Coast, 3s and 2s in the Midwest, 3s and 2s on the East Coast. Spread, spread, spread. But it's not one earthquake causing the other. It's that all these quakes are caused by this first small, depending on how much energy is pumped in, then large, or then larger, then extremely large, standing waves that form when you pump energy into a closed system. But what's the closed system? The red lines, which technically are all connected to each other, and it tries to equalize on antipodes, on opposite sides of the planet. It'll go from the Pacific, try to seek a way around to the Atlantic, and and many people ask me, and I've got to clear this one up, why does it go over to the Atlantic and stop there? Why doesn't it go beyond and go over across and circle back around? It circles back through. It doesn't go back around. You know why? I think I figured out why. I don't have, again, this is just my ideas on possibly why. See the red line again. This is a north-south one. This is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It's a crack that starts at the surface and goes all the way down through the plate and goes to the underside. So if energy is coming across this way and it gets to here, it hits a crack that goes all the way back down to the underside of the plate. That there's nothing for it to pick back up on this side because this side is compressing from this way over to the east, seismically speaking now. The plates, they tell us, are moving some way or the other. I think they're rolling like logs in a river, but whatever. So it gets to the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and it goes back through the planet to the opposite side, the antipode, and comes back out like a feedback loop. You guys understand how a feedback loop works. Have you ever seen somebody stand next to take a microphone and stand next to a speaker? Right? And it starts to squeal, doesn't it? Right? It gets really loud. But if you listen close, you can do it. If you stand at the right distance, you get an echo, like Jimi Hendrix playing his guitar and at the right distance from the amplifier. But the feedback that can happen is you speak into the microphone, electrically, speed of light, goes into the system, comes back out as a sound, right? Your microphone picks it up, and it goes back in speed of light. Comes back out. Your microphone picks it up again. And each time that happens, that's this. Your microphone picking it back up, putting it back in. The end wave pushing back to the other end. And if you hold your microphone for long enough next to the speaker at the wrong time and angle, you can blow the sound system. And the same thing applies for the energy traveling through the planet. That when it gets to the X's, if it's a big enough push, it comes back out the other side and carries the process on. Starts over with new deep quakes. And it can build into a crescendo, a break, a relief of that tension. But that relief of tension is only temporary because the break has to spread around the whole planet. And we get the same size quakes dropped off along the whole way. And that gets me back to my big discovery on earthquake forecasting that everybody denied. And now here we are, and you can do it yourself. By the way, final note on this. If you want to know how to forecast earthquakes, I've already published how to. Step-by-step directions. It's an hour-long video. I could probably condense it down to 30 minutes. But the hour-long video, me explaining the extreme details and how to do it yourself. There's no secret, no magic. We're talking about a standing wave and middle points between sets of areas that are currently moving that you can see. You can see the areas that are currently moving. So it's pretty easy for me to find the halfway point between these two areas of 5.4s because right here it overlaps on the triangular bend of the plate boundary right there. It's so obvious. And it lands right there. We go back over onto the plate boundary map from the USGS. Take a look where it lands, guys. Right here. Halfway point between these quakes and these quakes, which, by the way, the USGS map is so incomplete. It's not showing you yesterday's quakes, so you don't know about the 5.7 that's here, right? 5.7 here yesterday, 5.4 here today, halfway point here, so obvious. And the middle point breaks, or very close to it, with something larger than what's on both sides. Same with this 5.4 and 5.7 here. Do you think it's any coincidence that we're dealing with a 5.4 and 5.7 here? I'm showing you everything 0.0 and greater. And we're dealing with a 5.4 and 5.7 here. And the distance that we're talking about is twice the distance is the United States is across. That is a standing wave of very low frequency of some kind. And it's building, and then the quakes just break along the way as the wave saturates through those red lines. It's so simple, but man, it took me years to figure it out and had to fight through a ton of eggheads along the way to get it out to the world. Do you have an earthquake plan? You know what? Before I get into that, one more thing, my Hawaiian viewers. Oh, man, I always forget about you. Hawaii, Alaska. I'm sorry. So, to talk about Hawaii, we have to talk about Alaska. Alaska was warned this past week. I warned Anchorage for 5.0 level activity. Mount Denali got hit by a 4.8. Let me show you where Anchorage is. Anchorage is right here at the bay or inlet of this harbor on the north side of this fork. And Mount Denali is right here, right where the bend of the plate of the edge of the deformed edge of the coastal accretionary plane of the craton is. In other words, Mount Denali is on the edge of the plate. But earthquake struck at Denali right north of Anchorage. I warned for a 5, 4.8 came rolling in. It's been months since anything has hit there of any size. Now something else is getting ready to happen, but it's going to happen over to the west at the mouth of the Aleutian Island chain first. We should see a new 6 in the next few days. I already told you we're going to see 6s come back where they're 5s. So there's 5s all the way across the West Pacific, each halfway point, new 6. So new 6 on the Izu Ridge, new 6 down here or 7.5 high point, down here at Sumatra, or down here at Papua New Guinea, and the potential of large earthquake activity in the middle of Sumatra, Indonesia. But the same thing applies up here. The middle point's going to get hit, and it's going to be by something bigger than what's on all sides. I think 6. Once a 6 strikes there, then we find our new halfway point, which will be determined by tomorrow's quakes, most likely, over here to the east. I would say that most likely, again, I don't have any quakes to base it on now. I could base it on the current small quakes, I suppose, which would be right here at the tip of the Aleutian Island chain again, right here. This actually goes, this is mainland Alaska still. We have a volcano there. So that volcano, gosh, what was its name? Was that Seismopochnoi? No. Oh boy, they're going to get me on that one. I can't remember the name of that volcano there at the tip. It erupted a few months ago. But it doesn't matter. I don't forecast eruptions. I'm watching for seismic, so we're going to watch for something in the near 6.0 range. Let's put it at 5.8 to 5. Upper 5. 5.8, 5.9. Striking right there at that middle point, next to the volcano. And then, of course, we have our warning going for the United States now. On land, in the Northwest. No excuses. If I'm wrong, I'll get back on and whip myself into shape. If I'm right, I won't get any credit. I'll get beat up, whatever. It's cool. I'm here to warn you. I don't care about... Well, there's no thumbs up or thumbs down anyways now, so who cares? Now, let's go into Hawaii. Hey, aloha. So, the past week, the USGS and Hawaii Volcano Observatory, actually the past few weeks, have been on a roller coaster ride where they said that Kilauea stopped erupting. But then, like magic, a bunch of 4.0 range activity showed back up. In between that time, a series of small earthquakes struck across the Big Island, dividing the island in half and making a ring of small earthquakes around the Middle East Rift Zone in Hawaii. Let me show you the Middle East Rift Zone so you can see it. All the way over here, beautiful Hawaii. Oh, wait, do we still have a screen capture and everything going good? Good. Here's Hawaii. We're going to do a side profile view on Hawaii and show you what happened. So USGS issues this statement saying, or the Hawaii Volcano Observatory, saying that the eruption stopped. I was shocked because they previously said Pu'u'o'o went on for 20 years. So when they say something stops, I said famous last words on that, right? And then the small earthquakes began, going across the north part of the island here, starting at Hualalai, which is an ancient volcanic field you can see here on the northwest side of the Big Island. Line of small earthquakes going from up there across the north side of Mauna Loa, all around the peak, but down below it, of course, inside the volcano. And then the line of earthquakes going down here, going down into the Middle East Rift Zone, which I need to show to you from a side profile for you to really understand it if you don't know about the Middle East Rift Zone. All right, now we got it. Here's Mauna Loa, the biggest shield volcano on the surface of the planet, not counting undersea mounts, but this. And all around the Middle East Rift Zone, this is the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park where all the trees are. And all around it are eruptive points, including Pu'u'o'o, and at the top of it, at the top of the Middle East Rift Zone, is Kilauea and its crater. There it is, with the water still inside of it from the previous, before it blew again. There's lava inside of it now. Red, hot, burning lava, not magma, lava. It's actually erupted, it's up on the surface. But the Middle East Rift Zone right here, this thing had a bunch of earthquakes going around it in a big ring. When that happened, a bunch of small earthquakes again. A big ring of small earthquakes going around the Middle East Rift Zone. I get back on last week and issue the warning for new 4.0 plus activity to come rolling in. I'm like, look, we're swarming out. The Middle East Rift Zone's clearly recharging. USGS has said this thing stopped, but seismic, we're getting ready to have it. And then boom, 4.2 hits. And it had been, again, months since any 4.0 range activity. And they're all like, oh, you got it, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not bragging. I just have to tell you that the reason you increased is because the seismic came your way, like the standing wave. We watched it come your way. It excites the magma down inside of the chambers. Compresses. That wave travels through the magma. And you get a peak of a wave coming up underneath you. Next thing you know, you're getting yourself a new outbreak of earthquakes across the whole island. And it focuses in on the spot that already broke. Path of least resistance. Point of least resistance. A broken point that's already erupting versus a spot that hasn't. So the energy traveled right across, and in a line no less, from northwest to southeast, and excited this area. So wait a second. Ha! Wake up, everybody! A line of earthquakes going northwest to southeast across the Big Island. Gee, what else goes northwest to southeast, going out from the Big Island? Well, the Hawaiian Island chain, Dutch. But look where it connects to. It connects to the undersea mount chain that I told you about at the start of this update. The letter C shape, the big crescent shape that goes and connects into our quake down here at Peru perfectly. And we go back up, and Hawaii just branches off and goes out. So, a line of quakes going northwest to southeast means a push came in from northwest to southeast. First, that was the small quakes. Now we're swarming. We're swarming. And then guess what? Like Harry Potter waved his wand and said expecto petroleum. That's a joke. That's a fracking joke. All of a sudden, the USGS comes back out and starts talking about, oh, increased seismicity, blah, blah, blah. Hey, you said it stopped. No point in talking about it anymore. It stopped. It didn't stop. It's not going to stop. And we'll probably see new volcanic here eventually, very soon in the next few weeks to months, as a new push comes in that's great enough to excite the Middle East Rift Zone into some volcanic activity. like it won't be that long. It's right there. It already caused the 4.0 level activity. Once we get up into that 5 threshold of energy coming in, I would say that that's pretty much back to where we were when we got our big blast that happened. So them saying it's done, I mean, yeah, I guess it is when it comes to the rising lava lake, but that doesn't mean the eruption's done. That's just a small hiatus of a few weeks, and all it takes is a new push to come in from the northwest. Now you know which way to look. You start seeing stuff come in from Japan and build up to the northwest, you know to then watch Hawaii, which is a flowing river, up, down, and over. I may need to even put in a small series of dotted lines that go down to Hawaii directly, just so everybody can see it, in case I'm not here or whatever. Speaking of me not being here, I'm back now. And if you want to know how to forecast, you can go watch my video. But the arrows are on the map. You can watch the flow come your way. And that gets into preparation and being prepared. Look, if you live along a river, do you pay attention to the rain and flood that happens upstream? Yes, you do. You pay attention to that. Floods, I shouldn't just say a flood. You have floods that happen regularly if you live on a river. Well, these are the rivers of the planet. And the seismic flow spreads out and it goes and tries to equalize around the whole planet indiscriminately. And I am on the arrow. I have to live in a state of preparedness on the north side of the New Madrid seismic zone, out here west of St. Louis. So I'm not speaking from inexperience. However, knock on wood, I've never felt an earthquake of any size. That freaks me out. Should freak you out too a little bit, I guess. Don't wish it on me, guys. 9:51 p.m. Perfect time for me to end this broadcast. Let me remind everybody, don't be scared. Look, we're talking about big earthquake activity over in Indonesia and in Papua New Guinea. We're talking about 5.0 level activity in the northwest United States, enough to knock things off shelves. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I could keep going. We could issue warnings for Africa. We could talk about Europe. I want to get this down into an hour's broadcast so that people can watch and it can be palatable. Once you get into 2-hour range, it's just mind-numbing, even for me. It's all a little bit mind-numbing. That's how they missed it all. They were too busy playing games and doing these other things in the geophysics world to actually notice a pattern in anything. I'm the Rain Man of earthquakes. I'm not nearly as well-dressed. Don't be scared. Be prepared. Peace out. And I'm going to upload this here on my YouTube channel. We're going to watch it back as a premiere after doing it live here on my channel. Isn't that awesome? So watch out for the premiere of this in just a little bit. If you missed any of it, you can watch it back. Feel free to tune in 24/7, 365, or at least when my stream's running. And there is no chat room. There is no thumb up or thumb down. I mean, you can hit it, but only I see it. Right now, it's got a few thousand thumbs up already. So thank you for the thumbs up. I mean, it's just I got it off. I don't want people to sit there and judge it based on that. It's science. You don't get a thumb it up. Or yeah, I don't like the science. Well, I'm sorry. We'll leave the thumb up, thumb down thing to people who are like rating video games and stream antics and stuff like that. Rating an earthquake stream is pretty pointless. In the chat, if somebody wants to start their own Discord or chat room of some kind, I'm not opposed to that, but I'm not going to be involved or managing it. That's up to you, and you can, do your own thing. If it will get infiltrated eventually by some group, I guarantee it. So just be, prepared for that, and for it to take up all of your time, and you don't get paid for it, and they'll end up suing you, and yeah, don't do it. Word up, much love. Just watch the earthquakes. Discuss amongst yourselves in your own private group somewhere on Facebook, I guess. Oh, wait. I don't even use Facebook anymore. I still have it, but I don't use it. Can I get an amen to that? Peace out, word up, and much love.